Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Poison X storyline as we take a look at X-Men Blue number 22. So, last time on Poison X. While following a lead to whoever kidnapped Corsair and the Starjammers, Venom and the X-Men wound up encountering an alien arms dealer by the name of Hazemancer, the arms he traded in were symbiotes that he had captured. They wound up attacking his base, and in the battle they wound up breaking one of the containers that held his stash of symbiotes, and they all wound up bonding with the X-Men. With the added boost, Venom and the X-Men were able to take down his security system, and with Jean Grey's mind reading, they were able to find another lead to who kidnapped Corsair and the Starjammers. In this case, they were able to figure it out by learning that he had implanted all the symbiotes that he had kidnapped with tracking devices, and so since the people that kidnapped Corsair and Co. were bonded with symbiotes, odds are they could track them through that. As such, with that information extracted, the heroes the heroes wound up turning Hazemancer over to the Nova Corps and pretty much just shut down his operation, while they went off to go find Killer Thrill and Co. But unfortunately for them, even while Hazemancer was captured, someone wound up breaking him out. As at the end of the last issue, Hazemancer wound up coming face to face with a poison version of Kraven the Hunter, who explained to Corsair that he required, or who explained to Hazemancer. Sorry, I got the names mixed up there. But anyway, basically, Poison Craven told Hazemancer that he required his assistance, and that's where the last issue ended. And today's issue actually opens up with Killer Thrill and her crew on their ship as they're in Brood space, going to meet with the Brood, they're going to be turning Corsair and the Starjammers over to for the bounty. Basically, Killer Thrill is getting impatient, but as they're kind of drifting through space, trying to meet up with whoever it is, trying to meet up with the Brood. So they wound up getting an alert on the ship that something just slammed into them and breached through the hulls 4 and 5 of the ship. As such, Killer Thrill immediately calls down to those decks and wants to know what the hell broke through. And the comic cuts to those decks as we see the lower members of her crew kind of explaining what's going on. And it turns out what smashed into them was a giant ice ball, which at first, all the crew into thinking that it's maybe just drifted out in space and it just happened to slam into them by sheer coincidence. But strangely enough, the ice, the ice from the ice ball is starting to spread out across the ship and is actually starting to freeze it in place so that it can't go anywhere. Which the crew is even surprised by. That is till one guy gets a better look at the ice ball and realizes, oh shit, something's inside there. And sure enough, he gets proven right as immediately a concussion blast breaks through the ice, and we see that inside are Venom and the X-Men. As such, Jean Grey managed to use her psychic powers to pretty much just shut down the higher motor functions and speaking prowess of the crew, so that they are less of a threat. And using one of the crew, she's able to communicate to Killer Thrill that, oh, it's fine, there's nothing to worry about, so don't worry. There's nothing to worry about. We're taking care of it right now. So, though Jean admits that that's only a temporary solution, they probably have 5 minutes before Killer Thrill and her group realize that something's going on. As such, while Cyclops wants to once again turn to violence in order to figure out where his dad is, Jean is still able to use her powers from keeping him from going over the line as she manages to rip the information out of one stray crew member's head. And yeah, it turns out that he is still alive, and again, it confirms to her that they were planning to turn Corsair and the Starjammers over for a bounty. And as such, using her psychic link with Scott, she's able to give him the information on where Corsair and Co. are, and from there, the group kind of splits, as Cyclops naturally wants to go save his dad, and in the meantime, they still have Killer Thrill and her cohorts to deal with. So Cyclops splits off to go save his dad. Though Jean does tell Scott to be careful, and likewise he tells her, and likewise he relates the same thing to her. Which also leads to some nice character stuff, because Jean is the one that's narrating this issue, and so as Scott goes off to go save his father, Jean kind of laments that, well, she kind of has a bad feeling going on right now. Throughout the comic, she talks about how she knows that she and the X-Men will return to their proper time at some point, because, well, the space-time continuum hasn't been flushed down the toilet, so obviously at some point in the future, they're going to be pulled back to their regular time, and everything is going to go back to the way it's supposed to be. But at the same time, she can't help but wonder, is that even true? Because after all, could something maybe they were all wrong about how this whole time displacement thing is. So maybe they're not exactly so maybe things won't go exactly the way they think they do. And as such, when Scott goes off to go save his father, even Jean kind of laments that she wonders if she'll ever see him again. However, Jean just kind of writes it off as her symbiote just kind of pushing all the wrong buttons. As such, she gets her head back in the game, so to speak, as the remaining X-Men and Venom go further into the ship, and sure enough, after they get themselves all prepped up, they enter another area of the ship, and unfortunately, that's where Killer Thrill and her main crew are waiting for them, and so it turns into an all-out brawl as Venom and the X-Men just go toe-to-toe with Killer Thrill and co. With the Venom symbiote recognizing Killer Thrill from Deadpool Back in Black, and warning the X-Men, be aware of her, she's dangerous. In the meantime, with Scott, we see that he has managed to make it to where Corsair and the Starjammers are, and after using his concussive blast to take out the crew members that are guarding them, Scott is able to break in. And while at first the Starjammers mistake Scott for one of Killer Thrill's men, since he's bonded with a symbiote too, immediately Corsair realizes, no wait, this guy's an ally, and Scott does confirm it as he kind of peels back the symbiote skin to reveal his face. Though because the symbiote is acting as his makeshift visor, he has to close his eyes. Though ultimately the reunion is no less heartwarming, as immediately Scott and Corsair just hug each other. It's sweet, it's nice, and it's just and I just kind of love it. In the meantime, back with the other superheroes, the battle is continuing to go all out, and unfortunately, things are starting to come to an impasse as the X-Men, as Killer Thrill's forces and the X-Men are kind of at even match, especially with their symbiotes, and even Killer Thrill admits that she was already enhanced before she hooked up with her symbiote, so she thinks that they don't stand a chance. Unfortunately, Killer Thrill's men almost get the edge as they almost manage to get a sneak attack on a few of the X-Men, but Jean is able to turn the tide of battle in their favor as she uses her powers to create a psychic sonic screech that extends to Killer Thrill and all of her men, making their symbiotes believe they're being attacked and causing them all to get knocked out. So it looks briefly that everything's going fine. However, before the X-Men can revel in their victory, the Killer Thrill ship ends up sending an alert that another ship has gotten close and has now made contact with their ship. Of course, everyone's confused by this. Like, well, what is that? Is that the buyer? Are they here early? And Beast does try making contact using his future tech, but again, he's not picking up any signal. And as such, Killer Thrill decides, well, if they're the buyer, I better go meet with them, as it turns out she was able to resist Jean Grey's little psychic attack, and so she just pushes Jean aside and just makes a run for it to the other ship with the intent of making sure that she can meet up with the buyer properly. As such, Jean tells Venom and the other X-Men to remain calm, keep everything in order here, while she'll go and deal with Killer Thrill. However, again, as Jean goes there, she once again has a creeping feeling. But unlike the last time where she felt that her negative emotions were being augmented by the symbiote, this one it feels different. This one actually is coming directly from her symbiote. And in Jean's own words, feels like a more primal fear, like prey sensing a predator. And as a result, she starts feeling uneasy, but even then, she still powers through it and goes over to the other ship, where she does end up crossing paths with Killer Thrill again, who is more than ready for round 2, and even says she's boosted her psychic defenses so that Jean Grey won't be able to use that sonic screech power again. However, before the two of them can engage in battle, they end up finding out who the owner of the other ship is. Poison Craven, who watches them both from the shadows and laments how he hates to see symbiotes fighting like this. It just tears him up inside. It's like sister fighting sister. It's just not right, Of course, Jean and Killer Thrill have absolutely no idea who the hell he is, and even Jean's asked Killer Thrill, "Is this guy with you?" And Killer Thrill's like, "No, he's another uninvited guest." But pretty much Poison Craven just starts giving the pair the whole spiel, telling them that he has a solution. He'll bring them together to make peace, although he does let them know that he is also not a very patient man, and that if they will not accept what he has to give willingly, he's willing to force it on them. And sure enough, from the shadows surrounding Killer Thrill and Jean, well, out comes several come several little poisons, all poised and ready to strike, and sadly offering no escape. And, well, cutting back to the X-Men, things kind of go silent for them. And I don't mean like something happens to them, no. I've mentioned before, I think I might have mentioned, I have talked about how, I don't think I mentioned this, but Jean's kind of kept the X-Men all connected by her own psychic field. And it's because of that psychic field that they've been able to keep track of one another. She even mentions to Scott how he and her have a permanent psychic bond, most likely because, well, they're a couple. Of course you want to keep that in mind. But all at once, that field just goes dead. Even on Scott's end, he just screams out in pain and holds his head before he kind of collapses against the wall. And his father's like, "Hey, Scott, what's wrong? What's going on?" And Scott explains that for a second there, he could feel pain on Jean's end. Like, she was just screaming in pain, but then after that, things just went silent. And Scott starts actually getting worried as he realizes, I think something happened to Jean. Meanwhile, back with Venom and the other X-Men, even they're realizing something's not right. What happened to her psychic link? Of course, the X-Men want to hope for the best, but even Venom's like, okay, something's clearly up here. Something's clearly up. And it might have something to do with the other ship. While Venom at first thinks that it's still obviously the buyer that Killer Thrill and Co. were there to meet with, since why would a random ship be out of nowhere? Immediately someone enters the room and confirms, no, the ship didn't just randomly come out of nowhere, and it's not the buyer. The people inside were knowingly tracking the symbiotes, and they want them, as well as their hosts. And it's there that Venom and the X-Men turn to see who it is that entered, as the final shot of the comic shows us poison versions of Killer Thrill and Jean Grey. Both of them, and, well, the instant Venom sees that the poisons are here, Jean tells them that they're here to take them, and soon their whole lineage will come to an end. So, yeah, that's where we're gonna stop here. So, thoughts on the issue? Well, this is where I think things really start kicking in. For starters, in terms of the main plot progression, of course, things kind of finally come to a head because, well, the X-Men are finally now able to face Killer Thrill and her crew on a more even playing field, as they manage to catch up with her at her ship and are now managing to go toe-to-toe with her. And yes, the fight with between the X-Men and Killer Thrill and her crew is actually a pretty good fight. As it's still kind of cool to see both sides just utilizing their enhanced abilities to duke it out with one another. And I'm just gonna say this right now, I actually like Killer Thrill as a villain. She is one of those villains that is evil and loving it, because her whole shtick is that her psychic powers are fueled by her adrenaline. That means, in the sense, of course, she gets off on causing people harm. She basically just willingly and happily loves causing pain, loves causing discomfort, and she just enjoys every second of it. And I love villains like that, who are villains that just embrace that side and just have fun with it. Like, I know I'm the bad guy. I know I'm not going to see those pearly gates, but you know what? I'm damned. I'm going to be damned doing what I love. And I like seeing villains like that. They're kind of entertaining to watch. And Killer Thrill, or in this case, Reed, and Killer Thrill is no exception. She's fun to see. She was fun in Deadpool Back in Black, and she's fun here. So I dig it. I like that. She's definitely another reason why I think this is enjoyable. And so, kind of seeing her clash with the X-Men is really nice, because since she's a psychic like Jean, although not in Jean's caliber, she is aware of their tricks. And basically, to her, when she sees the X-Men, she doesn't see these big superpowered weirdos that are going to be getting in her way. No, she sees playthings. She sees the X-Men as toys that she can mess around with. She doesn't give a shit if they're here to stop her. If anything, them trying to stop her just makes it even more exciting, because now she has even more reason to start fucking them up and doing whatever the hell she wants to them. So again, it kind of makes her as a villain definitely makes the whole thing entertaining, and it especially helps that she doesn't have any real grand designs for her in terms of villainy. Her whole shtick in this story so far is that she and her crew kidnapped Corsair and the Starjammers, and they just want to turn them over for a bounty. Basically, that's the height of her evil. But what really brings home just how much of a bitch she is again, just how much she enjoys torturing people. As we saw in the comic, she continuously tortured Corsair and Co. just for the thrill of it. She intentionally let Corsair believe that he could escape from his shackles, and then immediately captured him because she could. She tortured him to help fuel herself up, and then she tried to even further make him feel like shit by trying to tell him, "Oh yeah, your son. Oh yeah, one of my men stabbed your son. He's dead now. What's that? How does that make you feel?" Like, she is definitely not a nice person. But again, when you have a villain who just is so slimy, so despicable, so evil, and loving it, I think that works. And and it showcases something that I do like with simple villains. They don't always have to be these big world-destroying fuckers who want to take over the world or have grand ambitions. Sometimes you just need someone who's cruel and who loves their line of work. And I think that can work. And I think it works with Killer Thrill. That's what I like about her. So, yeah, I dig it. On top of that, I will admit, I like the character and emotional bits in the story. Going back to Jean Grey, I love the feeling of dread she has throughout the comic. And it's a nice bit of foreshadowing for what happens to her at the end of the comic. Because after all, as I mentioned, this team of X-Men are time-displaced versions of the original X-Men. They may have variations in their powers, but the consensus with them is that they're the X-Men from the past. That they were the core X-Men taken out of their time and brought here to the present day. So odds are they're gonna eventually go home, and until they can figure that out, they're just here in the present, still doing their own thing and being superheroes. But what I like throughout the story is that that's not exactly a certainty for safety, so to speak. Like, let's go back to, let me explain. A similar situation would be, ironically enough, Ben 10. In the Ben 10, when I watched Ben 10, let's go to Ben 10. If you have watched Ben 10, you know that there are 2 episodes that wound up fast-forwarding to the future. And in those episodes, we met grown-up Ben 10,000, and in that future, his grandfather and cousin were still alive, and Kevin was a bad guy. Yet then you get to Ben 10 Alien Force, and in that series, Grandpa Max is missing and Kevin is now an ally. If you go by the future episodes are going to be canon idea, then that means that you believe that at some point they're obviously going to find Max, and at some point Kevin's going to go back to being a bad guy again, which does kind of suck, but hey, maybe you think it works. But then you get to the Max Out episode of Ben 10 Alien Force, and at that point it looks like... In that point, you're seemingly shown that Max is killed, and you're left believing that for a good chunk of the first 2 seasons. And as a result, it makes you start questioning what's canon anymore, and it starts making you realize that those future episodes, they're no longer they're no longer what you should be considering the baseline of the canon. They're not what you should be thinking about, because it's clear that at this point they just threw that out. They're not that's never going to that's not the future they're working towards anymore. And as a result, it creates a sense of uncertainty where things are going to go. It makes you wonder where things are going to go from here. And that's kind of what we have here. Up until this point, the X-Men believed that they obviously are going to make it back to their time at some point, because after all, like I said, the space-time continuum seems to be fine. Nothing bad has happened, so clearly they haven't disrupted any continuums or whatever. So clearly they're gonna be fine, right? Well, then you get to the poisons. And this leads me back to Jean's sense of dread. Throughout the story, the more Jean talks about how she thinks that things might not be what they seem, or when her symbiote feels primal fear for the poisons, you're just kind of left wondering, is she's gonna be fine, right? I mean, after all, Jean didn't just suddenly disappear at some point in the comics. She came back. We saw her in various storylines in the X-Men. She was a central figure in some of them. So obviously she makes it back so obviously she lives long enough for the X-Men to be sent back to the past, right? Right? Well, seeing her and her symbiote go into the lion's den when she confronts Killer Thrill and they encounter Poison Craven and all those little poisons, it makes you realize just the oh shit factor here. And in a way, it kind of establishes, it kind of does the same thing that we saw in Venomverse, that essentially anyone can die here. And what better way to help showcase that than by having one of the X-Men, one of the time-displaced X-Men, one of the younger versions who believe that they are guaranteed a spot back in the past, get killed off. We see Jean Grey Jean Grey got consumed. Her powers, her form, her personality were all assimilated into the poison hive mind, and now she is now she's one of the bad guys, so to speak. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, Chinny wanted to leave the room. But anyway, yeah, pretty much by having Jean be taken by the poisons, it further sets up that things are not going to go the way you think they are. And it creates a sense of greater dread because now you know anyone with a symbiote is probably going to be next on the chopping block. So realizing that, so with that in mind, it makes you afraid for the other X-Men and creates more tension because now you realize just because they're from the past and they're supposed to go back to the past at some point, it means jack shit, because we just saw their leader get absorbed into the bad guy, into this big collective of creatures that literally eat people from the inside just to fuel a bond, and then take on their powers, appearances, and personalities just because those things are needed for the bonding process. That is what happens here, and as a result of that, it creates a greater sense of tension throughout the story, and I believe it's built up to perfectly throughout the story. Having Jean worry about all this, it helps build up the tension to when they finally confront the poisons. You know they're coming, and at first you think maybe this is false tension because again of the preconceived they'll go back to the past thing, but then by having her turn, you realize, oh no, this is not good at all. That things are not going to go the way you think they are, and I love that. I love that bit of tension. And like I said last issue, by bringing the poisons into this, it suddenly makes the entire story kind of swerve in another direction. Because like I said, up till this point, if the story felt like a standard search and rescue mission, an ally of the heroes has been kidnapped. The heroes naturally want to go save them. They have to follow any leads they can. They get into a few scuffles along the way, but for the most part, it felt like a standard superhero adventure story. But then you throw in the poisons, and suddenly this rescue mission becomes a whole other beast entirely. Because now that the poisons are here, it's now a matter of just surviving. Because, well, all of the X-Men are bonded with symbiotes right now. And as we saw in Venomverse, all it takes is one little poison to come in contact with someone bonded with a symbiote, and that's it. We've seen Jean Grey get absorbed, and now she, Killer Thrill, and all the other little poisons are having their sights set on anyone else bonded with a symbiote, which means Killer Thrill's men, the X-Men, and Venom. So they're in danger, and the best course of action is to probably run. Yes, it means leaving Jean Grey behind, but considering what happens with the poisons, like Spider-Man said in Venomverse, it's best to not think of them as your friends anymore. It's a great tone shift that immediately can grab your attention and make you realize the heroes need to run. They cannot fight this battle. The only way they can get out of this is if they just bolt as fast as they can and go as far as they can. I love that. It's a great way of grabbing your attention, and with the final shot of the comic being just Venom and the X-Men being confronted by the poison Killer Thrill and Jean Grey definitely makes you realize things are kind of coming to a head, and that ultimately no one is safe. I love that. It's great. So, yeah, on the whole, really good issue. Really good issue. Brings things to a head. Great plot twist. Great character stuff with Scott. Oh yeah, that's another thing I forgot to mention. Scott, I love that. Like I said, it was minor, but I loved seeing Scott reunite with his father. Again, it's nice. I like that. I like little mushy stuff like that, and I actually do like that Scott finally does show some genuine positive emotion by reuniting with his father. Like, peels back the symbiote, he has to close his eyes, but he smiles as long as he can hold his dad. I like that. And he says he's just happy to see him. It's again, it's sweet stuff. So I do like that. It's another aspect of the comic that I like. So again, good stuff. So anyway, yeah, like I said, it has good action. I love the plot twist. I love how it's built up to. I love the emotional stuff with Jean and Scott, as that not only helps add for character, but also is great foreshadowing. And the final panel of the comic showcasing the poison Jean Grey and Killer Thrill is a nice way of showcasing just the threat level of what they're facing now, of what Venom and the X-Men are facing now, and that ultimately things are gonna come to a head. So overall, good issue. I like it. Really good issue. So, yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Saturday as we wrap up the Poison X storyline and see just how Venom and the X-Men get out of this. So, till then, hope you have a good Thursday. Take care.